Stop what you are doing. I need you to hear this before anything else today. I have asked myself for 3 years what I would have done differently if I had known, before that morning in March, what I know now. If I had known what was waiting on the other side of that cardiac arrest. If I had known that 39 minutes of clinical death would strip away 47 years of priesthood and leave me standing in front of something so specific and so undeniable that I am still not sure I have the right words for it. I would have preached different sermons. I would have looked at certain men who stand at podiums very differently. I spent 2 years convincing myself what I was given to carry was mine alone. But there were 3 people in that room when my heart stopped, and what I was shown does not belong to me. It belongs to whoever was supposed to hear it. I am telling you this because you were supposed to hear it. Subscribe to this channel and stay with what I am about to say, because you will want to be here when the next account arrives. And before we continue, tell me, what is the sentence from what you are about to hear that you will still remember next week? Write it in the comments. I will read every one. There was a morning when I performed my last Mass before retirement, and I wore the vestments with the same precision I had worn them for 4.5 decades. And I said every word in the correct order, and when it was finished, I shook hands in the vestibule, and I accepted small gifts, and I smiled and said all the right things, and I drove home to Bethel Park and sat down in my kitchen and felt for the first time in my life the particular exhaustion of a man who has spent his entire career performing rather than being. I did not know that was what I felt. I would not know that for another 7 months, when something stopped my heart for 39 minutes and showed me, in a place that cannot be described in the same sentence as any place I have ever visited, exactly the difference between a life of performance and a life of presence. I want to tell you about the performance first, because without it, you will not understand the weight of what was taken from me on the other side, or the weight of what was given in its place. I was ordained in the Diocese of Pittsburgh in 1977. I was 27 years old, and I was certain. Not the way young men are often certain, hot and loud and easily shaken. I was certain the way stone is certain, quiet and dense and impossible to move. I had answers. I had a catechism. I had a collar that said exactly who I was before I opened my mouth, and I carried that collar like a shield for 47 years. Father Thomas Callahan, the name on the parish bulletins, the name on the hospital visitation logs, the name that appeared in obituary programs at funerals I cannot count. Father Callahan will say a few words. Father Callahan will lead us in prayer. Father Callahan has been here longer than the paint on these walls. What I was, in truth, was a man who had learned to perform faith so well that I had almost forgotten what faith actually felt like. That is not a confession I could have made before March of 2 years ago. It is the first thing I understood when I came back from 39 minutes of nothing. I say nothing. That is the wrong word. I know it is the wrong word, and I use it anyway because the right words do not exist in any language I was educated in, and I was educated in 3. On the morning of March 14th, I woke at 6, as I always do. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table where I had sat every morning for 11 years of retirement, and I read, as I always do. And the morning was ordinary in every way that a morning can be ordinary. There were 3 people within reach of my house at the time it happened. My neighbor Margaret, who heard the sound through the shared wall and called emergency services. My niece Claire, who had spent the night in the guest room and was still asleep. And a young man from the gas company who had been scheduled to read the meter and arrived to find the front door open and me on the kitchen floor. These 3 people can confirm everything that occurred between the time my heart stopped and the time the paramedics restored a rhythm. I know exactly what they can confirm and exactly what they cannot explain. And the gap between those 2 things is where this testimony lives. The event itself was a massive cardiac event. That is the clinical language. It happened without warning, without the preliminary symptoms I had been told to watch for, without any grace period in which I might have thought about what was coming. My heart stopped. There was a moment, one moment, not extended, not drawn out, in which I was aware of being in my kitchen, and then I was not. What I mean by not is that I was somewhere else. I want to be methodical about what I am going to describe next, because the impulse when describing this place is to reach for grandeur, for sweeping language, for the full orchestral register of religious ecstasy. And that impulse is exactly wrong. What I found was not grand in the way performances are grand. It was precise. It was specific. It was present in a way that nothing on this earth has ever been present to me. And the difference between the presence I encountered there and the presence I had performed in churches for 47 years was so absolute that it constituted in itself a kind of judgment. To the left of where I became aware of being, there was light. I say light because that is the available word, but I mean something that was doing what light does. It illuminated. It gave shape to everything within it. It made seeing possible, while being nothing like any phenomenon I had ever encountered that carried that name. It had depth. It had temperature. It had what I can only call a character, the way a person has a character. An irreducible essence that persisted through every variation in its expression. It was not white. It was not warm yellow or cool blue. It occupied a frequency that does not correspond to any position on the spectrum my eyes were designed to perceive, and I perceived it anyway. To the right of where I stood, and I say stood though I had no body, because the spatial relationship was as clear as if I had been standing in a room and turned my head. There was a stillness that was not absence. It was the stillness of something completed. I cannot improve on that phrase. Things to the right of me had arrived at their final form and were resting in it, and the peace of that resting was so total that simply being proximate to it was itself a kind of gift. Above me, I understood, not saw, not heard, but understood, the understanding arriving as information arrives in a dream, already present, that there was scale I could not process. Not infinite in the abstract philosophical sense I had used that word in homilies. Infinite in the way that standing at the base of a mountain and looking up is different from looking at a picture of a mountain. The scale was above me, and it was real, and it knew I was there. Below me there was nothing, and the nothing was not threatening. It was simply the place that was not yet needed. I did not move toward the light immediately. I say immediately because time was present in that place, but it did not move the way it moves here. It was more like temperature than like a clock. It was a quality of the environment rather than a sequence of events. and I existed within it rather than proceeding through it. This is the first point at which my theological training, which I had carried everywhere for 47 years, became completely useless to me. I had read every description. I had used other people's descriptions of divine encounter as source material for sermons I delivered twice a year at Easter and Christmas. I had the vocabulary. The vocabulary was a child's drawing of the thing itself. I turned toward the light. I do not mean I walked. I mean that my attention moved and everything else followed. What I encountered in the light was a presence. I am using the word presence because I am aware that any more specific word I choose will carry freight I cannot control. What I can tell you is that this presence knew me. Not knew me the way a parishioner knows the priest who baptized their children and buried their parents. Not knew me the way a biographer knows a subject. Knew me the way a person knows a room they have spent every night of their life sleeping in. The knowing was total, and it was not neutral. It was warm in the way that the word warm has never fully conveyed, but that everyone who has ever been genuinely loved has felt. The specific warmth of being seen without flinching, of being known in your most defended places and held there without judgment. This is where I discovered what performance costs. In the presence of that knowing, every sermon I had ever delivered became visible to me as what it was, a construction. Every moment I had stood at an altar and projected certainty I did not feel. Every time I had given pastoral counsel while carrying my own unaddressed grief. Every occasion on which I had used the collar as the answer to a question I had not actually asked. All of it was visible. Not condemned. I want to be exact about this because the word I am going to resist is the word judgment. What I experienced was not judgment. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from stepping out of a building you have been inside for so long you had forgotten it was a building, and looking at it from outside in full light. The presence did not speak. Not in the first phase of what I experienced. It communicated. There is a difference that I cannot resolve in English, and I have tried in Latin, and I have tried in Greek, and the difference persists. Speaking is linear. It has a before and an after. What this presence did was deposit understanding the way a hand places an object on a table. Complete, immediate, already arrived. The understanding was simply there, and I knew it had come from outside me because it contained things I did not know. The things I did not know are why I am here. The first understanding I received was about myself. It was not flattering, and it was not crushing. It was a complete account of what I had been, offered without the editorializing I would have brought to it myself, and the accuracy of it was more humbling than any punishment could have been. I had spent 47 years in service to something I genuinely believed in, and that belief had been real, and it had also been used by me as a performance, as an armor, as a way of not having to be a man in the ordinary, complicated sense. The presence showed me both of these things simultaneously, as coexisting truths that together constituted the shape of my life. And what I felt standing in that showing was not shame, but grief. Grief for the version of myself that had hid inside the role. The devotion I had practiced for 47 years I can see its origin now in a way I could not before. It began in love. A young man of 23 who looked at the mystery of existence and fell toward it with everything he had. That love was real. It was the realest thing I had brought with me into the priesthood. What was added to it over decades, the institutional gravity, the performance of certainty, the weight of other people's expectations for what a priest should be, that was the accretion. The devotion remained underneath it, buried but intact. And when the cardiac arrest stripped everything else away, what was left was the original love, pure and without armor, which is what met the presence and was met by it. I want to move now to what I was shown because I have delayed it as long as I can, and what I am about to tell you is the reason this account exists. After the first phase of understanding, after the accounting of my own life, the presence shifted. That is the only word, shifted. The way a conversation shifts when the preliminary things have been settled and the real thing can finally be said. And what arrived next arrived not as warmth, but as gravity. Not as comfort, but as weight. As something I was being shown not for my benefit, but because I was being asked to carry it. I was shown a face. I want to be as precise as I know how to be about what this means and what it does not mean. I was not shown a photograph. I was not given a name. I was shown what I can only call a rendering, a complete, three-dimensional, unmistakable portrait of a living human being, delivered to me in a state in which I had no body and no brain chemistry and no organ capable of producing hallucination. The face was shown to me the way a detective might show a witness a composite drawing, except that the composite drawing was not an approximation, but a document. I cannot tell you who this person is. I want to be clear that I genuinely cannot. Not that I am protecting anyone, not that I am being circumspect for legal reasons, but that the presence did not provide a name, and the instruction that accompanied the showing was not to name, but to witness. What I was shown, and what I am responsible for having received and carried back, is the physical description of a living man, already active in this country. He is of medium height. His face is long, narrow at the jaw, with a prominence to the brow that gives him an impression of intensity from the front that dissolves when viewed from the side into something softer, more carefully composed than genuinely felt. His hair is dark, silver at the temples, in the way that gives men of a certain age a particular authority, kept in a style that is deliberate without appearing deliberate. His eyes are pale, not light blue, but the kind of gray that changes color in different light, and they are his most compelling feature and his most dangerous one, because they communicate attention, specific, personal, present attention, in a way that makes the person being looked at feel chosen. He is not unattractive. He never has been. The attractiveness is part of what he was made to be. He speaks with authority about spiritual things. He has access to language that sounds like wisdom and reads like wisdom when written down, but the presence showed me the gap between the surface and what lies beneath it. And the gap was not absence. The gap was inversion. Every true thing that spiritual language is meant to point toward, this man uses as a vehicle pointing away. He builds communities. He gathers people who are genuinely hungry for something real, who are in pain, who have been failed by institutions, who are looking for the specific warmth of being seen without flinching. And he positions himself as its source. He is not its source. He has learned to simulate its surface. This is what I was shown, and this is what I was given to carry. I asked. I did not ask in words, but the question formed and was received. Why me? I was a retired priest from Pittsburgh who had spent 47 years building a career of careful, institutional, heavily performed faith. I was not a prophet. I had never claimed revelation. I had spent my entire ministry being cautious about exactly this kind of claim. The response was not explanation, but demonstration. I was shown, briefly, the shape of my own life from the outside, not the performance of it, not the priestly career, but the original love, still intact underneath all of it. And the thing that arrived as understanding was this: the devotion that began as love and survived 47 years of institutional weight and performance was exactly the preparation for this moment. I had been made into something that could carry this without being destroyed by it. The weight required someone who had been formed to bear weight. I came back into my body the way a man falls into cold water. There is no other description. One moment I was in a place of complete presence and total knowing and absolute peace, and then I was inside flesh and pain and fluorescent light and the sound of a defibrillator cycling down and a paramedic saying something about rhythm, and I had never in my life felt so far from home. The grief of that return is something I still carry. I want to be honest about that. Every morning I wake up in my bed in Bethel Park, and the first thing I feel is the distance between where I am and where I was, and the distance does not diminish with time. What does change is my relationship to the distance. I have learned to treat it as orientation rather than wound. The three people who can confirm what happened that morning cannot confirm what I saw. Margaret can confirm that she heard the sound and called 911. Claire can confirm that I was on the floor and unresponsive when she found me. The young man from the gas company can confirm that a resuscitation was in progress when he arrived and that I was not breathing. The medical record from Allegheny General Hospital confirms 39 minutes from the first verified flatline to the first return of rhythm. None of them can confirm the face. None of them can tell you anything about the geography to the left and the right and the above and the nothing below. That is mine alone to carry, and I have carried it for 3 years in silence, which I can no longer justify. There is a world, the one I inhabited for 47 years, in which what I have just told you would require institutional review and pastoral consultation and careful discernment and a process that would take longer than whatever time I have left. In that world, a retired priest does not go on record describing a face shown to him by God during a 39-minute cardiac arrest. In that world, the performance of appropriate caution is more important than the content of what was shown. I am no longer in that world. What I was given on the other side was not the church's to own. What I was given was the devotion born from the return, not the 47 years of institutional service, but the return to the original love that had been there before any of it. And the practice that devotion requires now is not silence. It is witness. The deep meaning of what I was shown is exactly this: that the world of performance, the church's performance, the state's performance, the performance of every institution that has ever used genuine human hunger to consolidate power, is ending. Not in the apocalyptic sense I preached every Advent for 47 years. Ending in the sense that its time has passed and the kingdom of presence is pressing against it from every direction. The man whose face I was shown is one of the instruments of a final, very old performance. He will appear to those who are hungry and suffering and have been failed by every institution they trusted, and he will offer them the warmth of being seen, and the warmth will be real, in the way that a skilled actor's tears are real, produced by genuine technique, experienced as genuine emotion, and entirely in service of something that is not what it appears to be. I cannot stop him. I was shown the face, not given a weapon. What I was given was the witness, and the witness is what I am discharging here, at 74 years old, after a career of careful performance, on behalf of the presence that showed me what genuine seeing looks like. What I would ask of you is not fear. Fear was not what arrived with the showing. What arrived was something closer to the grief I mentioned earlier, the grief of a man who loves humanity and has been shown something about what humanity is walking toward, and who understands that love and warning are not opposites, but the same thing said with different urgency. If you have felt, watching the news or sitting in a congregation or listening to someone speak about spiritual things with an authority that makes you feel chosen, a subtle wrongness that you could not name, trust that feeling. The presence that showed me the face also showed me that this is the faculty we were given for exactly this moment. Not theology, not institutional membership, the simple, animal, God-given capacity to feel when the warmth we are being offered does not come from the right source. The honest reckoning, the one I am extending to you gently and without judgment, is this. You know something is not right. You have known it for longer than you would admit in most company. The testimony I have just delivered is not new information. It is confirmation of something your own soul has been registering. What you do with the confirmation is yours to decide. I am only the priest who died in his kitchen and came back carrying a face and a responsibility and a devotion that is finally, at 74, pointed in the right direction. What I will carry with me, and what I invite you to carry, is the distinction between performance and presence, between the warmth that comes from the source and the warmth that is a very good imitation of it. I carried the imitation for 47 years without knowing the difference. I know the difference now. It was the most expensive knowledge I have ever received, and I am giving it to you without charge, because it was never mine to keep.